Thank you, Mr. Davies. I have Councillor Rowlands first, and then I'll move on to Mr. Pickup. Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lynch. Phil, obviously picking up on that that you've just been talking about. You started off by saying that you're the most improved council, and then go on to point out, as the other councillor was pointing out, the failures. Obviously, you going on the same theme. Obviously, you've received and read the report on the New Ferry explosion. I wanted to know your comments on how you handled that, because it was on your watch, and maybe given an apology. Have you given an apology to the people of New Ferry?
Thank you, Councillor Rowlands.
Thank you, Les. No, I haven't, because I don't believe I do need to apologise. I felt that we handled that disaster really effectively, both at an officer level and a member level. I can remember vividly being in New Ferry the day after the explosion and being part of the team that galvanised all the resources of the council, our partners in the police, the fire authority, the NHS. We immediately put £300,000 of our scarce reserves to help the businesses and the residents who were displaced. We followed that up over the last few years with additional funding, and I have had several meetings with businesses and residents from New Ferry who were really, really glad of the role that the council played. I think the one thing that I do think I'm very sad about is the complete lack of any central government help for New Ferry. It's all come from the council, unfortunately. But I don't believe I've got anything to apologise for. I'm very proud of the role that I played and my administration played in that disaster. So that's my response to that question.
Councillor Rowlands, and then I'll move on to Councillor Pickup, Mr. Pickup. Mr. Councillor Rowlands, have you got a follow-up to that?
Yes, I would actually. Obviously, Councillor Phil Davies, you obviously don't take failures rightly. You have not acknowledged them at all. You didn't write a plan to the government to get what money was available there, and the scarce resources of £300,000 was pitiful response. As far as I'm concerned, you were in charge of that, and you are demonstrating to me now that you don't take responsibility for your failures. So how are you going to take responsibility in the role of Deputy Commissioner?
Mr. Davies?
Well, I do believe that I take responsibility for things that go wrong. I've already explained at length the issues we had around our corporate governance in 2012, our Children's Services Department. So I think I said on a couple of occasions we held our hands up and said we got things wrong. I do think it's a very bad example, New Ferry, because the council, under severe financial constraint, put in 300,000 from our reserves. We put in 200,000 in the last year while I was leader of the council, and 1.3 million of capital funding to acquire sites in New Ferry, which businesses and investors could use to regenerate the town. I do think, again, Chair, it's not appropriate, I think, to enter into a political debate about this. I do think my issue about New Ferry is that the government said repeatedly that the disaster was not serious enough to qualify for the Bellwind scheme for disasters. That was I remember the letter I received from Jake Berry, the minister at the time, saying that. So the government said it didn't qualify for disaster relief, and therefore we were left as on our own to provide help for that community. And I do think the government have got a lot of questions to answer as to why they didn't put anything into New Ferry when they did in other disasters like Grenfell and Salisbury.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. I am going to bring in Councillor Rowlands for a sum up if that's okay, before I move on to Mr. Pickup, who's waited quite patiently. Councillor Rowlands?
Just want to sum up, Chair. Obviously, Mr. Davies has not read the report properly. It was an independent report. It has damned his handling of it. The money was there if he'd applied for it properly. They didn't do that. They wanted to play politics with it rather than actually help the people at New Ferry. And I do think that the people of New Ferry deserves an apology from him. Thank you, Chair.